Hi, everybody. My name is Keith Freeze, and I sent out these tweets pretty recently about different line combinations that I could see the Kings going with next season. We do have free agency starting on July 1st, and anything can happen, so these lines may or may not come true. But regardless, I just want to give a quick disclaimer and say that I tend to delete my tweets pretty often. So if you go to my Twitter after watching this video and you don't see these tweets on there, that's why. But anyway, I figured I would explain my reasoning for doing these lines because I'm sure that there's a handful of Kings fans that would like to discredit me and my opinion for having these combinations. But anyway, for these two lines that you see on the screen. The first one is Foegele with Kopitar and Greentree. The second is Turcotte with Tavares and Laferriere. And it's from left to right, so at left wing it would be Foegele and Turcotte. At center it would be Kopitar and Tavares, and at right wing it would be Greentree and Laferriere. So the reason why I'm going with these lines. There's a lot of Kings fans that believe that Liam Greentree is not ready for the NHL. And I guess in a larger sense, they could be right. But in my opinion, I think he's ready to turn pro. I think there's a lot of Kings fans that would agree with that statement. Just as kind of an FYI to those out there that don't follow the situation closely enough, he's currently playing in the Ontario Hockey League, not to be confused with the American Hockey League Ontario Reign, but he's playing for the Ontario Hockey League, which is a part of the Canadian Hockey League. And there's a ruling that in your 20-year-old playing season that you can turn pro so long as you are 20 years old by December 31st of that season. Well, unfortunately for Liam Greentree, he turns 20 on January 1st, literally the day after that cutoff. So his only two options for the upcoming season are either to make the Kings roster or he'd have to go back to juniors. Now, there's a lot of Kings fans that are already assuming he's going to get what Brandt Clarke got a couple years ago, which is that he would make the Kings team. He'd play up to the 9, entry-level games. Then he would get a conditioning stint to go to the American Hockey League with the Ontario Reign for 2 weeks, hopefully get an invite to play for Team Canada in the World Junior Championship, and then after that he would go back to juniors in the OHL, finish the season, and then once the season ends, join the Ontario Reign if they're in the playoffs and his team with the OHL is out. But I don't think that every player's progression to being a pro is the same. And there's no denying that Greentree does need some development, but the general rule of thumb when it comes to different positions on the ice is that wingers are quicker to join the NHL than defensemen, who are quicker to join than centers, who are quicker to join than goaltenders. There are certain positions that take longer to develop. And Liam Greentree is going to be a left shot right wing at the pro level. It's just projecting that way, and that's how it looks to be. So do I think as him as a winger that he needs to develop for 2 more years down with the Ontario Reign or go to Europe or whatever? It's like, no, I don't think he necessarily has to be developed that long. But I do think that he needs development. So I've long pushed for the idea that Greentree would join the Kings this upcoming season as the team's 14th forward, and that he would stay with the Kings throughout the duration of the season, and he would never get, sent back to juniors, anything like that. Because if he stays with the team, the LA Kings, all of next season, even as the 14th forward, we saw a lot of times this past season where a guy like Akil Thomas was benched a lot. And in Greentree's case, he probably would be benched a lot. So you'd maybe ask, well, why would you want to call him up then? Well, if he was with LA, he could work with the development team throughout the entire year. So one of the big things about Greentree that people have said is that his skating isn't that good. It's like, well, if he worked with the development team all season and was in the weight room and was getting bigger and playing to his size and learning how to do all these things, even learning how to travel as a pro or developing chemistry with the guys in the room, whatever. Like, there's a lot to gain by having him with the Kings next season beyond putting him in the lineup. But if we're putting him in the lineup, I think this is maybe a good spot for him because Foegele and Kopitar are north-south straight line skaters that forecheck and they play tough. And if you're trying to get a young guy to go along, you would put him with guys like a Kopitar that can teach him, hey, you need to be at this spot for this reason because when you're there, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. Foegele plays a lot like in that Kopitar style, and I think that if you want to give this name a line, you might call it like the past, present, and future line, and you would certainly have that sort of dynamic playing out where Greentree is the future. He's maybe not relied on so much in this line, but to drive the line, but he can certainly finish on the line for you. He's a good goal scorer, and I think this might be a good spot for him, especially considering, and I'll get back to this in a second, but we know that Jim Hiller likes to go with the 11 and 7 combination, and you're going to see I'm going to put up a 12-man forward group. But if he goes with 11 and 7, you don't have to plug in Greentree necessarily. You could have Foegele and Kopitar with another forward that's playing multiple minutes throughout the night. But if you are going with the 12-man set, I think Greentree could fit into this. Now, again, if Greentree is sitting out, I've pitched the idea that Greentree could maybe play about 35 to 50 games throughout the season. And if he's only playing that many, if he's getting kind of a pitch count, then yeah, you're going to plug in a different guy on this line. But that could be the 11 and 7 format. It could be just Jim Hiller's, propensity for wanting to change lines anyway. But I'm saying that this, if you got to February, March, and you're maybe making a playoff run, that you could plug these three together and get some chemistry going before the playoffs and then ride that line. Now, we're going to go to the next line, which is Turcotte, Tavares, and Laferriere. And I'm not saying that the Kings are going to get John Tavares in free agency. However, what I am saying is that there needs to be some kind of strong centerman down the middle between Alex Turcotte and Alex Laferriere. And we know that Turcotte and Laferriere can play good together because we saw it this past season when they were kind of paired up briefly a couple times, but we saw that they were good together. And I'm kind of going on a typical Kings, line setup, which is that back in 2012, we saw Jarrett Stoll as the third line center, who was this really good centerman, face-off winning veteran player, be flanked by Dwight King and Jordan Nolan, who were these younger upcoming Kings. We saw the same thing with Jeff Carter down the middle when he had Tanner Pearson and Tyler Toffoli with that 70s line. So it makes sense to kind of do this here. Now, if it's not Tavares, maybe internally it's Phillip Danault. And again, I'll come back to that in a second because I have another slide to show you guys. Maybe it's Phillip Danault. But my thought is that if you can get John Tavares to sign with your team for, let's say he signed a 3-year deal worth $6 million or like $6.5 million. I don't necessarily dislike Phillip Danault. In fact, I like Phillip Danault quite a bit. I don't dislike Trevor Moore. In fact, I like Trevor Moore quite a bit. However, if you are going to change things up, I think that the Kings could and should go to another team that's kind of looking to get some production and instant chemistry in their middle six and trade Trevor Moore and Phillip Danault as a package deal to that team. And what they would say is, like, go back and look at our recent history. You'll see that when we plugged in Arvidsson next to them or when we plugged in any third man next to them, they always were consistently good together. And I said this before Arvidsson signed with Edmonton last summer, but I was saying that if, as an example, if the Chicago Blackhawks were trying to like sort of jumpstart their second line and have some instant chemistry, that they should have signed Victor Arvidsson in free agency and then traded with LA for Philip Deneau and Trevor Moore, and that three-man line could have been the second line in Chicago right now. It didn't go that way, but I am saying that you should still try and pitch these two together in a trade, not a separate trade, but in the same trade together, with the idea being that they're really good together, so, I will sell them as a package deal. But again, if they're not going to go with Tavares, then I would still go with Deneau between Turcotte and Laferriere. But why I'm saying that is because collectively, I believe Philip Deneau's making $5.5 million and Trevor Moore's making $4.2 million. That's $9.7 million. If you could sign Tavares for six and a half, you're saving $3 million, and you're plugging in at that 3C position. And I'm not saying that Tavares is an upgrade over Deneau, but I am saying that Tavares maybe has more offensive punch that could go along with Turcotte and Laferriere, and this is maybe why this would be a good third line. And just to clarify, I know that people might think I'm saying Greentree is up on the second line with Vogel and Kopitar, but in reality, think of it more as this is your middle six, that they might be getting equal amount of playing time rather than it's second line, third line. This is just your middle six. And within this, you can plug and play. Maybe Laferriere goes up with Vogel and Kopitar, and maybe Greentree goes down with Tavares and Turcotte, or there's some kind of other moving parts. But regardless, I'm saying that there is a possibility here where this could be your middle six, and they're maybe not given as much playing time as Kopitar is used to, but they're still given meaningful minutes, especially if you're adding in a John Tavares. Now, to this next slide that you're seeing, this is the four forward lines that I would go with at this present time, and you'll see that I have Deneau in instead of Tavares, but I do believe that the Kings' top line should be Kevin Fiala with Quinton Byfield and Adrian Kempe. Again, it's from left to right, left wing, center, right wing for all these lines. But I think that needs to be the Kings' top line. That's why I actually am not against the Kings trying to bring in Mitch Marner. In fact, if he wanted to come here and he wanted to sign here, I think you do it, because you do need a guy like that that's willing and wanting to come to this team. But I'm saying that if they don't bring in Marner and they have Fiala with Byfield and Kempe, that line combination is really good and really strong and offensively, punching, that you could have those three together and it would really work. Then with that middle six, you would have the lines that we just talked about, but instead of Tavares, it would be Deneau. And then finally, with your fourth forward line, I would go with Andre Lee, Samuel Hellenius, and Taylor Ward. And I have pitched this many times, and it seems to fall on deaf ears because people think that the fourth forward line needs to be different or reworked differently. But then those same people talk about how the Kings squander their prospects and they don't develop them right. Well, you can't have it both ways. You can't say we got to give up on the prospects and redo the fourth line and then say, well, why did we give up on somebody so quickly? It's like, well, you need to give these young guys chances to play. And we know that Andre Lee and Samuel Hellenius play really well together. And the third guy that played really well with them in Ontario is Taylor Ward. And I'm not an Ontario Reign guy. I don't watch enough Ontario Reign games to give you an honest opinion. But what I can tell you is that I've seen enough of their line combinations set up prior to the game where those three have been put together a lot. And I bet if I was to ask an Ontario Reign guy like my buddy Anthony Colazzo, like he'd probably tell me that Andre Lee, Samuel Hellenius, and Taylor Ward have always been a good trio. So how do you bring in a guy like Tavares, or how do you, keep Deneau but move out a couple other guys to free up some money? Well, you do that, but then you also keep your fourth line really cheap. like Lee, Samuel Hellenius, and Taylor Ward collectively would probably be less than $3 million, maybe like $2.5 million for that fourth line, which is really cheap, and you're getting natural chemistry. That's something that I think is missing from people's perspective about the Kings. It's like when you have a line that has chemistry, you ride it. And I think that that line would have chemistry. So is it the sexiest line on paper? No. And in fact, like, I'm sure that there's a lot of people out there that would rather bring in different veterans and have a stronger veteran presence on the fourth line instead. But what I'm saying is that their chemistry cannot be taught, and you just need to ride with what they do well. So Lee, Hellenius, and Ward is my fourth forward line. Again, you've got Fiala with Byfield and Kempe as the top line, and it's real chemistry, again, with really high offensive ceiling. And then your middle six is plugging and playing with those six different guys. And again, like I said, if Jim Hiller is quick to play the 11 and 7, or he's going to switch up the line combinations, look at that list without factoring in Greentree, and that middle six can still work. You can still plug guys around. You can move guys around even in the top 9, or the top 8, I guess. But anyway, the point being that even if you took Greentree out of the mix, you're still having a viable offensive set. But anyway, I just wanted to quickly try and justify why I made some of these line combinations, because I think people maybe aren't seeing it the way I'm seeing it. And I'm not a GM. We're going to find out what Ken Holland does in a couple of weeks here, but it's just a different perspective looking at things that other people might not be looking at. Either way, thank you for checking out this video. My name is Keith Freeze. Have a great one, everybody, and go check out my LA Kings Summer Guide on my channel.